Welcome to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde, and every Thursday on this show, I talk to somebody interesting from the world of guitars. It could be a guitar maker, it could be a player. Today, I'm sharing with you a story unlike anything I've ever heard before. Alister Atkin of Atkin Guitars. Now, there are a lot of folks out there making Gibson and Martin-inspired flat-top acoustics. That's nothing unusual. What is unusual about the Atkin guitar story is that he's making them over in the UK. And I have to tell you, some of the most discerning guitar dealers I know here in America are swearing by these instruments and telling me to go check them out. And I did, and they are fantastic. And so I figured it was time to talk to Alister and hear what is going on, because honestly, it's pretty unusual, aside from like Loudon guitars, for guitars made in the UK or Europe to make their way over here in any critical mass. And Alister has an interesting business model. He's got a great team. He's not afraid of technology. It's kind of a novel thing, and I had a great time chatting with him. I hope you enjoy this interview. I'll include links to his website in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. I know our friends at the Acoustic Shop and Acoustic Vibes and the Music Emporium and Folkway Music up in Canada are all happily carrying Atkin guitars already. It's a cool story, and the guitars are absolutely stunning. And as you are about to hear, he's making electrics now too, which is super interesting. We are about to finish our 55th issue. It's going to be mailing soon to everybody. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy hearing about what we're up to, but you've never subscribed, please, by all means, now is the time to do it. You're going to get our 55th issue fresh off the printer the minute it mails out, and you'll get 4 issues with your one subscription. And best of all, you will be not only basking in great guitar journalism and beautiful photography, you will be supporting this entire little endeavor that we run here, celebrating all things fretted instrument. Speaking of celebrations, I'm still in awe of what happened at our 2024 Fretboard Summit. I don't know if you've been over to YouTube lately, but if you type in Fretboard Summit, there are dozens of videos from our event, including some calling it the anti-NAMM and all sorts of fun stuff. Please, 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 if you want to be a part of the 2025 Fretboard Summit, we've already announced the dates. It's August 21st to 23rd. And you can get early bird ticketing right now on fretboardsummit.org. We are going to be sharing even more content from our summit from last month on this podcast. So please stay tuned. Please subscribe. If there's any sessions or panels you particularly want me to put out sooner than later, reach out to me. And before we get to my chat with Alister, I got to thank our sponsors. They are Peghead Nation. Hopefully you know about Peghead Nation. It is like the premier way to learn about roots music and Americana and bluegrass online. Some of the greatest instructors around, many of whom have been featured on this podcast or in the pages of the Fretboard Journal magazine. Go to Peghead Nation, use the discount code FRETBOARD. You're going to get your first month free or $20 off of an annual subscription. I hear they're having their 10-year anniversary coming up. We're also brought to you by Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar right here in Seattle, Washington, one of the coolest guitar stores around. You have to go check out this place if you ever are in the Pacific Northwest. The most interesting selection of vintage acoustics, electrics, synths, effects pedals, you name it, amps, they've got it all. They also have one of the best and most efficient repair centers around. So there's an entire second building next to Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar where they have a whole team of folks working on guitars and amps. I've trusted them with my own instruments. You should follow them on Instagram or head over to mmguitarbar.com. Tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. Stringjoy Strings is still offering you 10% off of your first order at stringjoy.com with the discount code FRETBOARD. And iZotope has just released iZotope's RX11. If you are working with any recordings and you're just pulling your hair out because there's some weird noise, there's something, they've got all sorts of plugins that can help you out and will save you hours through your workflow. Check out iZotope. I'll include a link in the show notes. And with all of that out of the way, here is my conversation with Alister Atkin of Atkin Guitars over in the UK. This is a good one. I hope you enjoy it. Alister, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. What a great show to appear on.
So, I don't know what happened, but I feel like in just the last year, maybe 2 years, your name is popping up. I know it's been, your brand, has been popular overseas perhaps for a long while, but I feel like some of my favorite North American dealers are telling me like, have you checked out these guitars? And so I figured it was time to talk to the man himself.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could call it a 30-year overnight success. And yeah, no, it's starting to happen over in North America now. And I mean, you've got such great dealers over there, and obviously the ones that sort of spring to mind that we're in, Chicago Music Exchange and Music Emporium and the Acoustics Shop and various others. But those are great stores. And when you come from where I come from, and I come from a little town called Herne Bay, which is known for nothing and is a rundown kind of backward town, you look at these places and you know, it's the stuff of dreams. And so I kind of, getting into them is a real, you know, high point for us. And it weirdly, you know, and I think probably exactly what the Beatles thought, you know, getting a bit of notoriety or success in America does sort of give you a bit of credibility in some respects, you know, so that it's taking the instrument home and making a bit of a splash. So that to me is really exciting.
Yeah, well, and traditionally guitars, acoustic and electric, tend to travel east. The American guitars end up over there. Rarely does a Loudon or a Filed or, you know, any of the European or UK brands, you know, make it over here with a critical mass. So something happened. But before we get to that, like, tell me how this whole thing started for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, much like everyone who's listening, I'm sure, you know, we all wanted to be rock stars. We all thought we might perhaps one day get in a band and release an album or whatever and become famous and get to do that. And I twigged pretty early on that wasn't going to happen for me. And the next best thing was being in around music. And I knew that I wanted to work within the music industry. And I was lucky enough to be able to make a guitar at school. And we had something called CDT, Craft Design Technology. And I asked the teachers if I could make a guitar. And I made that guitar. It was an electric guitar. Wasn't very good, you know, but I got the bug and I thought, wow, what a great thing that is. And then I noticed a course up in London at the London School of Furniture. And probably you've talked to other makers who passed through there. A big one for us was Patrick Eggle. I don't know if you know who Patrick Eggle is. Yeah. Well, Patrick was there. Not the same. He's much, much older than me, Patrick. He was there before me. And there were a few others. And we got to actually in England, there was no place to work and make guitars. You know, you couldn't get a job as a guitar maker. Loudon would have been, I'm not even sure what he was doing at that point. But so he had to go somewhere to get some of the skills down. And I spent 2 years at the London School of Furniture on a guitar making course. And then I just came back to my hometown, which is Canterbury, down south here in England, and started the business. And it was really born out of, you know, I had no business plan. The business plan was to make guitars and keep making guitars, and one day to try and sell something. And most people will probably, you know, any other luthiers who've been on this show will know exactly what that's like. You don't make any money for a long time, and you live very much hand to mouth. But if you're into something, it's easy in that respect. You know, you just get lost in it. Something that happened at the same time, just as I left school, my father died, and I was really bereaved at the time, and guitar making was the perfect thing to just get lost in. And you'd find that time would just go and you weren't thinking about that sort of, you know, heavy stuff so much, and you're just concentrating on guitar making. And I spent years just locked in a shed, working out how to do what I do. And luckily, the internet arrived at the same time in the early 90s. And suddenly you could go into like the Collings workshop or the Gibson workshop, and you started looking at pictures and go, oh, look, what are they doing there? And so and the other thing that is brilliant about the US compared to the UK, and it's changing now, is that American people are so much more up for sharing information. When I was starting out, you'd phone a guitar maker in England and they go, oh, I'm not telling you that. It took me 30 years to learn that. I'm not just giving that information away. But you'd phone up, remember phoning up like, is it Bill Tippin? Do you know that name?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he told me stuff, and I phoned up Jim Olsen. He told me things, and I'm nobody to them, and they'd actually give you information, and you could ask them questions, and of course it might get a bit tedious for them if I kept on phoning up, but I'd had enough guitar makers that I could do the rounds, and what do you do about your finish? How thick do you do your tops, and all that sort of stuff, and gradually, I found out a lot of information that was very useful. And then at that point, it's just a matter of working and trying to repeat the process. And of course, any guitar maker will tell you you've still not made your best guitar yet. So it's always that thing. Oh, the next one's going to be so good, and then you do that one, and then on it goes.
I've heard that sentiment about American Lutherie culture being this communal knowledge sharing, world from many others. And I guess I just take it for granted because everyone I've talked to, even though I'm not a guitar maker trying to like learn trade secrets, like everybody's just so open and wants to connect with others. But I guess in the European world, the old world, that is unorthodox.
Well, it's changing now, largely down to me, not me, but people like me. And Seth, you had Seth Backus on recently, is that right?
On our other show, yeah.
And Seth's a really good friend of mine, and of course his stepfather is like the godfather of British guitar making, and Andy Manson is like a lovely guy, and he'll tell me, I'll phone him up, and he'll go, "Oh, why do you want to know anything from me?" I'm like, "Because you made guitars for Led Zeppelin." And I think we've all realised the power of it. And just because you tell somebody something doesn't mean they can actually do it either. So it's a lovely thing, and then the community gets stronger, and I think all those walls have been broken down now with shows like this and YouTube, and everyone's everywhere, aren't they?
So when you were taking that course at the furniture school, was that an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar?
It was acoustic, and it was mainly classical guitar. Okay. So we built classical guitars at the college. At the same time, I think I would go into the studio, into the workshop, and I'd be trying to make other stuff as well. And I remember trying to make my versions of Chet Atkins Gibsons, like the solid bodies, because I figured they'd be much easier to make than acoustics, and made a few things like that at the time. And making classical guitars by hand, and we had very limited tooling. I don't actually remember seeing a router at the college. I think there might have been one locked away somewhere for special occasions, but everything was done by hand. And while I wouldn't advocate that as a way to make a living for anybody, to learn your skills and learn how to use your hands and feel how wood works with your hands is a really, really great thing. But that still doesn't change the fact if my standard thicknesser broke tomorrow, I wouldn't pick up a plane and start thicknessing anything by hand. I'd buy another plane, another drum or belt sander, So, but it's all good experience.
Given how rare, it's not super rare, but they're making a living as a luthier in the US or in the UK is very hard. Was there much done on the business end of like what it
Nothing.
means to be a guitar maker at that
No,
college? No. Okay.
no.
It's just,
Well, the reality of it was that most of the people teaching on the course were guitar makers, but they were supplementing their income to, being teachers to keep guitar making. And there's a guy it'd be worth you talking to. He's a really interesting guy, and he sells in the US. A guy called Dave Whiteman, who's a classical builder, and he's still making. But he taught me at college, and he's made a living out of making classical guitars. But yeah, so there was no business side to it. And funnily enough, a few years ago, when I probably with 30 years next year, about 10 years ago, I think I thought to myself, it'd probably be good if someone went up to that college and actually told these people how to make a living out of guitar making. So I called them and said, look, I went to the college. Would you like me to come up and do some lectures? I'll do it for free. I just, And they went, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's really that important. It was that sort of reaction, and I just thought, oh, those poor kids. That's so terrible. But anyway, I don't think it's there anymore now.
Okay. And when you got out and your father passed away, and you just like poured your heart and soul into building guitars, were those acoustics or electrics?
Acoustics, yeah. Okay. Everything was about acoustics. I can tell you exactly what happened. I saw the cover of the Crosby, Stills and Nash album, the very first one. We're still sitting there with a Dreadnought, and thought, those, I've just got to keep making those. And it was Joni Mitchell and Neil Young all the way. It was the sound, and that sound just everything changed. I was very much into heavier music when I was younger, and I'm still the biggest Rush fan out there. But when I heard that music, and my brother came home from university with like the Crosby, Stills and Nash album, put on that, and Sweet Judy Blue Eyes came on, and I was just sold. That's it. Take me to heaven. It was wonderful,
And were you able to, what it was, the famous street, Denmark Street? Were you able to go try out like, good copies of or good versions of the originals? Yeah.
Well, to be honest, actually, funnily enough, yeah, we're about an hour away from Denmark Street, and I would spend so much time up in Denmark Street, but back then I wasn't really that familiar with the vintage stuff, and I don't think my head would have been telling me to look at the new Martins, and I remember seeing my first Collings in the Acoustics Centre, and it was like everything changed. It was I saw it, and I said there's a guy there called Seamus Brady who ran the place, and I said, "What's this then?" He goes, "Oh, those are new in. They're from Austin. Give it a go." And I picked it up, and I was just like, "Shitballs! This thing's insane!" And I the aura that it gave off, and all of those things. I went home and I had to rethink everything that I'd been thinking about acoustic guitars, and so that really, when you saw what was perceived as a newish guitar company making such great instruments, it sets a new standard, and it takes it to another level, and I think that's what was great about that time as well, because those boutique, I don't know how, do you call them boutique makers? The smallish manufacturers.
No one knows how to call those people.
No.
They're not handmade. They're not, boutique, whatever.
Yeah, the small factory makers who really hone their skills and just up the level, and it's, to me, that was just an amazing thing. The other thing that happened at the same time, I went to Germany and I went to visit Henkes and Blatzer. Do you know those guys?
Yeah, of course.
Now, those two were insanely good. And again, the difference between them and Collings for me was that Henkes and Blatzer were working in a tiny workshop in this medieval town in Tübingen in near the Black Forest. And you walked in and you didn't see any CNC machines. You didn't see, it was all like, it was like walking into an old sort of, I think I said this on another podcast recently, but it's like walking into Pinocchio's dad's workshop, same stuff. And I picked up those guitars, and at that moment I realized that it was possible to make world-class instruments in a small workshop. If they could do it, and I'm not taking anything away from them, that if I worked really hard, I might be able to get close to what they were doing, because their stuff was insane. Have you played any?
Yes, they're incredible.
They are, aren't they? I mean,
yeah.
Anyway, those two were lovely, and I used to phone them up quite regularly and ask them. And for a while, we were sort of swapping lacquer sort of information and stuff like that. All the interesting stuff,
At this point in time, it was just you by yourself?
Yeah. So what I did, I shared a workshop. I rented a space from another guitar maker down here, who's more of a repairer at the time, a guy called Andy Crockett, who makes amazing arch tops, but he's so lazy that he can't get his shit together, and and he wouldn't mind me saying that. But he's about 70 now, and we spent 20 years working together, and a funnier time I couldn't have had. But he gave me lots of information because he's a brilliant craftsman. But so yeah, and I worked by myself for probably, I'm guessing 10 or 12 years, and then I hired my first guy, I think it was 18 years ago, a guy called Danny Martin, actually. So he wasn't going to be able to make his own guitars.
What do you do? I mean, building an acoustic guitar is like 1,000 tiny little decisions made over the course of a month or two as you're building this thing.
Yeah.
You touch a Collings, you touch a Blazer and Hanks, you see like, oh my God, this is a powerful, beautifully built guitar. But how do you go back home and kind of like refine whatever your idea was after being inspired by that? Because it's like, where do you even begin? What were the big things you needed to work on?
Right. Well, I remember thinking one of the biggest things was working out how the top worked, and the important parts of the top. Of course, you've got this piece of Sitka spruce, and you've got all these bits of braces, but it actually makes a difference how thick everything is and where you position it all, and all those sorts of things. And I remember having a conversation with Henkes and Blatzer, and they gave me some information on top thicknesses, and I remember going home and thinking, I've been doing that wrong. I'm going to try that. And when I tried that, suddenly the guitars got quite a lot better. And then the bracing, you'd find like on a Dreadnought, it's quite easy to make quite a bassy sound, but it's not necessarily easy to make a completely balanced sound. I think most people who make their first Dreadnought will often think, this thing's quite loud and it feels powerful. But the refinements within that sound aren't always the easiest things to get. So I think I spent a lot of time, like I'd finish one, and me and Andy Crockett would sit there playing it and go, right, what's going on here? Those trebles sound a bit flappy or something, and the next one you'd move something, and and the other thing that happened, which was brilliant, was have you come across Replay Acoustics over here?
No.
Right, it's an American guy. He actually went to Woodstock. Tony Winnecki. Be worth you getting him on the show because he's brilliant. He lives about an hour away from me, and he used to bring a lot of his repairs down, and he only deals in vintage Martins and Gibsons. So you couldn't find a better stock of vintage stuff in the UK, and it was all coming through our workshop. And Andy was repairing it all, and so I'd get in there with your calipers and just measure everything, see the angles of everything. I'm not the most sort of technical of people. I think of things in shapes and more imagining how sound travels, and sounds like a load of wafty rubbish, but it would be something that I would envision in my head and try and sort of get this feeling. Really weird, but I'd try these things, and you start to notice differences in tone and the way stuff really worked. And then you're kind of collecting all this information and sifting for gold, or panning for gold, and you're trying to find. And you get this, you unlock that key, and that's sticking. We're sticking with that, and then we're going to do this next time, and gradually you build up all this stuff, and it becomes the essence of what a great guitar is, and it takes years and years to refine that. I mean, I could tell you in 5 minutes now, but it takes years to get your head around that, and then also repeat, because the process changes every time depending on the wood, depending on the moisture in the wood, depending on all these different factors, the weather, and all this crazy stuff that when you began nobody ever talks about. And then, you send a guitar to the US and it goes to New York and it implodes in the winter, and all this stuff. So it's a harsh learning curve, all of it. And we always talk about guitars as they'll kick your ass around the workshop. Some guitars don't want to be guitars, and you have to work out how to deal with all these things and treat everything with the right techniques and everything. It's really odd. But another big thing that really helped was baking tops and braces. Game-changing thing. There's a really good website called frets.com.
Yeah, of course. Frank Ford, yeah.
Right. It's a wonderful resource. And in the Collings factory, I'd noticed all these someone had taken some pictures of their oven, and we bake everything at this temperature. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And, that was before people started talking about torrefication. They'd been doing that stuff for a long time. And I went straight out and bought an oven and started baking stuff. I mean, I brought stuff home and would put it in my oven. It's small. We have small ovens over here. You can't fit much in them, just a chicken, And so I'd cut bits off tops and bake them and see what they'd do, and find these sort of optimum temperatures and lengths of time. And I think I spoke to what was his name at Collings? He retired a couple of years ago.
Bruce Van Wart.
Yeah, Bruce. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he gave me some information that was wonderful, So I've been very lucky in that respect. People have always been up for sharing.
I guess I tend to think of this stuff as like the dark arts where it's just unobtainium, but you can bake guitar tops in your household oven. I had no idea.
Yeah. Maybe I've stepped too far and I've given. Yeah, you can. I mean, and now roasting maple is a different thing. You can't do that at home, but because the temperatures are very different. But yeah, there's a lot you can do with household appliances. Yeah.
And so, at what point did you start bringing electrics on board?
Oh, that's really new for us. That's like 3 or 4 years old. It came sort of after or during lockdown, really. I think everyone rethought everything and threw loads of ideas out there at that point, and a lot of cool stuff happened, really, didn't it? And there was this feeling that we need to enjoy ourselves, and if I'd go into the workshop and say, lads, what do you want to do? What should we do? And you'd get like, oh, can we make an electric guitar? And yeah, let's do that. And then the first thing we did was make our sort of version of a Jackson, with a very pointy headstock, and gave it a wild paint job and put Floyd Rose on it and all the stuff that is so far away from like a 1930s Martin. And we released that on what's it called? 1st of April.
April Fool's Day.
and we had videos and pictures, and people were like, what on earth is this? Is this real? And we got so much interest, and the magazines put all those roundups of all the funny gags over the day, and we got into all of these magazines with that, and it did us. We got a lot of coverage from it, But after that, we thought, right, well, let's try some other stuff, and we started mucking around with, S styles and T styles, and I always think it's nice to be able to make those traditional instruments as well as you can before you go somewhere else, just to really hone in on what made the great guitars great. For me, that's a nice journey, and I think for everyone else in the workshop, that's a nice journey as well. So we started winding the pickups in house, and just we made everything that you can make in house. I mean, we couldn't make tuners, and bridges. Well, we could make bridges, but we didn't make bridges. But so we'd just take the whole thing apart. We looked at a load of 50s stuff and from friends, and I think we came up with a really great version of those guitars. And they're getting out there. It's always difficult growing an electric guitar business, I think, because it's a very competitive business. But we've got some of our own shapes as well. We've got a couple of offsets and some really. Do you guys follow Justin Hawkins? Do you know that guy from The Darkness? Do you remember? I believe in a thing called love. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there you go. Well, he's now a massive YouTube guy. He's like got 500,000 followers on that, and they're still touring, and they're actually quite big. So he's been sort of pimping up guitars, and we've been designing guitars with him, and some really great stuff's come out of that. So yeah, we're getting quite a nice arsenal of electric stuff together as well.
And how big is Atkin Guitar right now?
There's 15 people working there, and we make about 700 instruments a year.
That's incredible.
550 acoustics and about 150 electrics.
Do you, I mean, one of the problems, and maybe you've benefited from this, I think one of the problems was, the pandemic had everybody wanted to go buy the guitar of their dreams, and meanwhile the staffing at a lot of these guitar companies was fleeing or non-existent, mm-hmm. or not around. I feel like just in the pandemic era, I've seen your guitars pop up at Music Emporium, Folkway Music. Do you have the same problems keeping staff and bringing staff on, or is it a little bit of a different vibe over there?
Well, because people don't have the choice of going, I'm going to go and work at Gibson, or I'm going to work at Collings or Iris or whoever it may be.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to become a guitar maker. Oh, it's only Atkin Guitars, It's not only that, but, there's a limited number of us doing it who actually employ anybody. And the other thing that, everyone who works for me, we've sort of, a lot of it they've come to us, and might be people who've worked in the music business, or we've got people who've been carpenters, and they want a change of lifestyle, and they sort of, you inevitably end up meeting lots of people locally when you're out, socializing or whatever, and the word gets around, they make guitars, and someone will come up to you and go, I do this. I'd love to come and have a look. And they come and have a look. And then I say, well, try out for a couple of days, see whether you like it. And we'll see if we like you. Excuse me. And everyone I've got has been through things like that. And I don't think we've had anyone that we haven't really gotten on with. And for me, the most important thing is that everyone gets on. The guitars are obviously very important, but the vibe in a workshop has to be, we're doing something really fun, and it doesn't have to feel like work. It can feel like every day is a fun day, and to me that's really important that carries on, and that we look out for everyone's mental health and all those sorts of things primarily, because that makes great instruments. And if someone's not the best woodworker when they come to work for us, we'll start them in a different part, or they'll start slowly, but people really surprise you. And the other thing that we've been really concentrating on is getting our processes much more standardized. We employ a lot more technology than we used to, and we open our minds up to like, for example, we just bought a massive 3D printer, and we're making all our molds on that. You can see it on Instagram. We've done a load of posts on it. But there's all these things, and and the guy who controls that isn't a guitar maker. He's a guy who draws things, So I have to sit. I'll sit with people and go, "Wait, can you make?" I'm like useless at that stuff, but I can have the ideas, or drive it in the right direction, and we sort of get those jobs done, and we'll go, well, that. The way we used to do that's really horrible, and it creates a lot of dust, or it's just, you have to be really good with a chisel. I wonder if we can make that a better way, and we'll come up with something that's a little bit more user friendly to put together. But nothing when we make a change to our production, it's only if it's as good or better than the previous part that we made. They'll never be like, oh well, look, that's easier to put together, but it's not as good, but it's quicker. That's not something we're interested in. We want it to be better or as good, but if there's a time saving there, that's fantastic. And when you get to the stage we're at, or the level we're at, time savings are really important, because for obvious reasons, financially it makes a huge difference.
You 30 years ago could call Jim Olsen or Bill Tippin or any of these builders and get advice on like how to build a guitar. It seems like it's more insurmountable to learn how to run an actual business with employees. Has anyone taught you along the way, or have you just self-taught? Because it seems like you've figured it out.
I really like people, and I see the value in people, and I like to see what people surprise you constantly. And I'm past the point of thinking I've got all the best ideas. To me, that's, trying to think of an analogy, be like Joni Mitchell saying, "I'll tell you what, Jacko, I'll play the bass on this one." Do you know what I mean? And so it's kind of, it's really important to let people shine. And the business side of things, I've always been interested in business, but I didn't study business, but I talk to a lot of people, and we're really close with Collings as well. We talk to Nully quite regularly, and Steve, and there's a group of us that will just sound out what each other's doing, and we've got like group chats, some of us, that will go, "Oh, what do you think of this? Would you do that or this?" And it's important to get those sorts of feelings. But really, I think you get hunches about what's going to work. But you have to also listen to people. And if you can't listen to people, then you're not really going to get anywhere, I don't think. But listen to the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I think something I've just learned recently is, I always assume dealers are just hyping whatever's in their inventory, but I know behind the scenes there's a lot of back and forth between the dealers and the builders, and the dealers are often on the front lines saying, you kind of need to do this a little differently, or my customers are noticing that. Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, we always listen to our dealers. I mean, there's some dealers that have invented guitars for us, and there's Rudy Bolts, who runs the Fellowship of Acoustics in the Netherlands. Do you know the Fellowship of Acoustics?
I know of it, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. It's an incredible place, and they're really, really nice people, and we've been working with them for years. But me and Rudy would stay up, we'd be Facebook messaging each other all night, just going, "What about this? What about that?" He goes, "I'll make something like this with that. That will be popular." And you'd get all this stuff together, and it's that sort of want to do something cool, It's like, we're here to do something cool, so let's just make it happen. And this is a wonderful opportunity. I think we were lucky because we do sell guitars, so we do get paid for everything, and that changes everything. As soon as you can actually afford to invest in people and, projects. R&D is just constant in a guitar making company. I mean, Bob Taylor, what's all that about? Mental. It's just like they just changed the scene completely, and though that generation, wonderful.
Yeah. Which, if you're on the acoustic front again, you've got Gibson inspired styles, you've got Martin inspired styles. Like, is there one model that sort of like outsells them all?
The biggest model, or the one we're probably best known for, is our J43. And I haven't got this here for that reason, but I thought I should at least have a guitar because I'm in my bedroom. But that is the J43. So it's a sloped shoulder dreadnought. And this guitar we build for the Buddy Holly Foundation. Yeah. I don't know if you've come across that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they came to us when they realized we built these, and they commissioned them for a lot of their players. And again, this model, I went really down when you go down the rabbit hole, and you can't come out until you've got most of the information. And so I think that's a very popular model. Our dreadnoughts are popular. An OM guitar is a desert island guitar to me. It's, that our version of a OM 28, which is we call an OM 37. That's a herringbone dreadnought. OM, who doesn't want one of those? They're just wonderful, aren't they? They're loud, but they're also sensitive. You can sit on the sofa and play them. Yeah. So we've got pretty much everything in the arsenal. If people want to have a look at it, the website's got most stuff that you would desire. And then we do offer quite a nice custom shop thing, and we make stuff up all the time. It's very important for me that we didn't just sit there making the same thing every week. I throw these sort of wild card guitars in. So we might sort of we make 12 acoustics a week, and then I'll leave 2 out and go, right, at some point I'll call them and go, right, we're going to do this, and we're going to do like a pink dreadnought, and we're going to do these with these inlays, and we're going to do a metallic green LG and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, like Joe Caruso at the Music Emporium, my first call with him, he's going, what's all this green guitar shit? It's like that sort of, who's going to want one of those? I don't get it. I mean, do you sell them? I said, well, look, Eddie's have one there on their website. He's going, oh yeah, I can't see anyone wanting one of those. And finished the call, I refreshed the Eddie's page, and they'd sold it. So I screenshotted it and sent it over to Joe, and he was like, oh, okay, go figure. And then every time I'd call him, I'd be like, do you want a green guitar? He's like, no, I don't want a green guitar. But I managed to get him to buy one for St. Patrick's Day. And he sold it straight away. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Stuff. Yeah, and you do age some of your guitars.
So our standard finish is an aged finish. But that's like a thin nitrocellulose with checking on it. It's not scratched up or anything. It's and if you were standing from a distance, you'd look at it and think it was just like a normal guitar. But what we do is we tint some of the bindings and just make it look like a really nicely looked after old guitar. I think we were the first people to do this, and I mean, there's other people I know. Is it pre-war? They do something similar. I don't know who's going first, but I remember just about 10 or 15 years ago, just thinking I must have a go at that. And we dropped a guitar by accident, and then we just started sort of bashing it up, and then put it on the website, and it sold instantly. And then we put more up, and it all became quite popular.
And do you find those generally either because of how you're doing the finish or because they've been bumped around a little bit, do they sound different? Do they sound a little more open?
Um, Now, so my first thing is that I fully believe that our actual aged finish, whether it's bumped around or not, is a beneficial sounding finish, because it's so thin. And we got to the point where we just don't make any mirror finish guitars anymore. The mirror finish is quite a lot heavier when you pick it up, because the difference is that there's on our standard finish, there's something like 12 coats of lacquer. If you're doing a mirror finish in cellulose, it can get up to like 24 coats, double. Now, if you carry that in a pot or a bottle, you can really feel the difference in weight. And not that it all goes on the guitar when you spray, but it's a considerable difference. So the lightness of the instrument is what strikes you initially, I think, and then the way that the lacquer doesn't sort of encase the guitar quite as much. It feels like the wood is actually on show, and the wood is moving, and it's not just a layer of finish that's moving. So I 100% believe that made a huge difference to the sound of our guitars. As for bashing them up, I'm not convinced that makes a great deal of difference in sound, but it does add a vibe that you either like or you don't, doesn't it? And I think there's a place for it personally.
In terms of voicing instruments, I think everybody in their head has a Martin ideal voice, and maybe it's a modern version, or maybe it's the golden era version. Gibsons are kind of a wild card. They're so unique, and they're so, wildly disparate, even amongst, two LOOs from the same year.
Yeah.
How do you approach those philosophically, and like, what are you going after tone wise?
Well, so I think if I was to actually look at our slope shoulder models, I think they are not as close to a Gibson as our Martin styles are to Martin. And the thing about the old Gibsons, I'm not convinced they've fared as well as the old Martins a lot of the time. Now, some of your listeners may well have a completely different view on that, and it may be down to the stuff that I've heard, and they might have the best J45 in the world sitting in their lounge. So it was my experience that some would sound they didn't seem to stand up to the aging as well as some of the Martins. But I did hear one of the best acoustic guitars was a J185 maple from about 1955, maybe. I might be wrong. I can't remember the dates of those, but it blew my mind. And maple guitar. And so I think that I personally look for the things that I like in an instrument, and sort of have moved the bracing around to try and tweak it into what I think is a great sound. So whether they're actually that comparable to the originals at that point, I'm not always sure, because you'll always find a different sound on those originals. But I just wanted to make something that we can make over and over again that sounds brilliant every time. And I think if we were throwing a dart in a dartboard, we're getting into the bullseye or the green, like, every time. Yeah, I'd never pick up one of ours and think I'm not, oh, geez, this one's a bit of a duffer. It doesn't happen.
You mentioning the maple just made me think, God, as if making guitars isn't hard enough. Making guitars in the UK, are you buying most of your wood from US suppliers, bringing it to the UK, and then some of these guitars end up back in the US? Well,
interestingly, a lot of the timber that you guys buy comes from Spain. So, because one of the biggest timber dealers in the world, or two of them, are Spanish.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of our stuff from them. We have a brilliant timber supplier here in the UK that I buy loads from now, and especially after Brexit, that did a number on us big time.
Mm-hmm.
We used to be able to buy Indian rosewood. I used to buy it on the Monday and have it in my workshop on the Wednesday from Spain. Now it can take 4 months because I have to get all the CITES documentation in place. And
I was going to say, you can't just rent a pickup.
Can't get into the country. I mean, you could, but then I mean, people do, you know. But the amounts we're buying and the, you know, it's really difficult. So we've got a great dealer over here, and I don't want to get into politics, but maybe that's where the government wanted that to go. We're buying from our own dealers more than we did, and that's a good thing. But it's been a pain in the ass because sourcing wood is getting harder and harder. I buy a lot of our maple for the electrics from Nova Scotia. Just outside Halifax, there's a guy who supplies loads. Seth gets his there as well, and yeah, that's all like roasted maple. It's brilliant. A lot of our maple in this country comes. We use sycamore as well, which grows in this country, and that's beautiful. I've often said, if all the other woods ran out, I'd be happy to make guitars out of only maple. We make amazing maple guitars. I think it's a brilliant tone wood, and I don't think it gets enough coverage really. I think I played with great Collings actually. A friend of mine had one last week. She is from America, and she was at I went to her house over here, and she pulled this really nice sort of, it was like an L00 size, and it was a lovely sounding guitar, you know, and again, lovely maple. Where do you stand on the maple thing? Are you into it?
Oh, it can be great. I mean, I think it's all in the hands of the builder, but yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Talk about a sustainable wood that has much more broader applications than people have given it credit for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Doesn't look right on a dreadnought for some reason, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Works for the J45.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird that it's like we're programmed to think certain ways about these woods.
I know.
Maybe I'm being ignorant here. I feel like your acoustics have penetrated the U.S. market. Are the dealers not taking the electrics on?
There are some dealers with the electrics, but we don't make many of them. Okay. We're making like 150 of them. So Chicago have some. This is terrible. There's another dealer in. I haven't got my computer here. Anyway, yeah, there's what are they called? I'll try and remember, or we'll put it in the notes afterwards. But yeah, weirdly, we do loads in Budapest. There's a shop there that buys loads of them, and so we've got a few of the UK dealers and some European dealers, and we're also, our acoustics are really big in Korea, and they're really after the electrics as well. I think that our electrics are a harder sell for the US market than they are for any other market, purely because, you know, it's the home of Fender and Gibson, and the pricing is the biggest issue in that respect. The blind test would tell you something else, I think, but you know, the pricing on some of that stuff, when we get it over here, it gets expensive, so our stuff looks reasonable, and when we send our electric over to you guys, it looks expensive next to your stuff. So but also a lot of that's down to building the reputation as well, and I think it's going to take us a little while to get the electrics rocking everywhere, and so many of them as well now go to players, so they don't see a shop anyway. You know, they'll go to we do a lot of artist stuff, so yeah. But we'll see. We've got a few other things in the pipeline for the electrics, and that I can't talk about it much now because we've got to do some we're working on a few things, but I think that's also going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, the designs I've seen, the Bouche, like it's a cool looking guitar.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's so much you can do with them.
So where do you see, like, as you look in the crystal ball of the next 5 years, do you want to be the Taylor, or do you want to be the Collings, or are you happy being exactly where you are?
I think I certainly couldn't deal with being the Taylor. My God. I mean, I just think that's like a superhuman thing to get involved with, and all power to that. The main thing for me is that the guitars stay brilliant, and I would like to grow in the right way, and I never want to get to that point where we're building guitars in our place that aren't better each year, and I think we've got so much technology in development at the moment with new ideas and new systems. I think in the next year, when all that stuff gets ironed out, we're going to be in the strongest position to really take it up a notch, into a really interesting place, so that we can actually cover more ground. We've got dealers in America who want guitars and we can't supply them. We've got dealers in Australia and Japan we've dipped our toe in, but it's lovely to break new ground in those areas and get to more players, and I think that really interests me, and I love meeting other I like meeting people, so going to some of these places and seeing people is good fun as well.
Yeah. When you talk about investing in technology, is that, I mean, I think everyone just assumes, like, is that CNC machines? Is that something else? Like, what is it?
Well, so there's CNC machines, definitely. And I mean, we've bought, I don't know, what have we got? We've got 6 or 7 CNC machines now, and we've started buying tool changing versions. So they've got, the capability to pick up, I don't know, one's got, we use this company called ShopBot from America, and you'll see it in various people's workshops. I think Martin have some actually, and we've got sort of 3 of those that we've one arrived, and we've got another 2 arriving. But it's the technology that we're employing to go onto them. There's all sorts of great fixtures and things that we're printing, and vacuum beds that we're printing, and all these lovely little things that we've thought, I bet that would work if we did that. And you start to unlock this whole new way of making guitars, but invariably it means that you've got to redesign the whole build process from the ground up. And it's like, oh God, we've got to make all the molds again. We've got to make everything again. But you have this hunch that that's the way to do it, and it will build a better guitar and save so many hours, and ultimately the end user will get something that is it's all going to get better. So this that for me is really fun, because when I think back how I used to make a guitar by hand in my first workshop, we've got a Plek machine now. I couldn't have dreamt of having a Plek machine. My first house cost less than the Plek machine. so it's all that stuff's crazy to me. But when you're into it, those are nice things to actually get involved with and watch how they all make the process more, flow better and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Alister, this is amazing. I mean, what a story. I mean, it's so
Thank
cool.
You.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure, and this has been a dream. I've spoken to various people. How'd you get on that show? And I'm really thank you so much for having me. And I hope to come to the Chicago show next year.
We've got a table ready for you if you want it. So yeah, let's keep us posted.
I'll make that happen, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Jason.
All right, thanks so much. All right, that was my chat with Alister Atkin. Great conversation. I really learned a lot. I hope you did as well. Keep the feedback coming, everybody. podcast@fretboardjournal.com. Let me know what you think. Leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. And as always, if you enjoy the podcast, try to share it with your friends on social media. Let them know what we're up to. It's a unique show. I value your support.